No game lasts forever. Eventually, every online dependent game will be shut down in favor of something else. And with so many live service games to choose from nowadays, it's important to know that all that time you spent playing that shooter with the boys will inevitably come to an end. And yes, Riley, that includes Fortnite.
And Podcast Brownie.
Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, or DeFu as I'm going to call it for the rest of this video for my own sanity, is a game that, if this video is coming out on time, will soon be closing its services online, and if this video came out late, closed its services on February 29th, 2024. DeFu is a spin-off of another spin-off series, Dissidia Final Fantasy, which was a pretty fantastic game. Dissidia was a one-on-one arena fighter that took characters and elements from throughout the franchise's history and made one of the most strangely awesome games the PSP has ever had. It would get 2 sequels, one being absolutely fantastic that built upon everything the first game got right, and one that ballsed up everything. But a couple years after that ballsing, DeFu was released on the iOS and Android stores. Ironically, DeFu, a game spawning from its fighting game, spawning from an RPG series, actually ended up leading back into the series' roots, with it being a turn-based RPG gacha game that takes elements from Dissidia. In this game, every character has their place in the turn order, and multiple factors can affect how fast a character gets to act. In DeFu, you have 2 types of attacks, one for bravery and one for HP. This big number above the characters' heads isn't actually their health. It's the bravery number that goes up from dealing brave attacks. If you reduce enough of the enemy's bravery, you'll inflict a break and move them back in the turn order, along with giving all your characters a huge bravery boost in the process. Then, you have HP attacks, which are used to dump the bravery you have into the enemy's HP bar. Where the real strategy of this game comes in is that when anybody, be they friend or foe, dumps their bravery into an HP attack, their bravery goes down to 0, making them breakable by any normal attack. Most enemies have an indicator telling you who they're attacking next, so winning a hard fight is absolutely dependent on picking who's dumping the bravery at the right times, so as to not let one of your characters get broken, because getting broken usually leads to the boss smashing you with an HP attack that will probably kill somebody. Of course, characters don't just have their default brave and HP options, they have their own specific attacks. Some attacks will also trigger a chase, which causes you and your allies to either hit them to gain brave, or dump an HP attack on them in the air. Each character has 2 unique skills to start off, along with a variety of moves that are unlocked by maxing out their weapons. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, and why would you be playing this if you weren't, seeing a lot of these recreations of iconic spells and limit breaks really does give your brain a sick nasty dopamine hit. The devs really tried to make every character's moveset feel emblematic of how they fight in each of their games, and so much of each character's personality really comes out in these moves. Alize from Final Fantasy XIV, for example, has a moveset that benefits from her using a specific combo of moves one after the other, which mirrors the rotations of the FF14 Red Mage. Edgar, my favorite Final Fantasy character, leans into his tools that are used to debuff opponents and throw all kinds of status effects on them. And seeing a fully realized version of him going ham on an enemy with a chainsaw is just a special kind of nostalgia that I didn't know I needed in my life. Jack, from objectively the greatest Final Fantasy game of all time, is also here. Absolutely just going ham slamwich on enemies and just generally being an angry boy. Some of these character choices really scrape the bottom of the barrel though. An NPC gets 1 line of dialogue in a game from forever ago? You better believe they're here and ready to party. Riku from Final Fantasy X-2, the fan favorite that's actually a party member? Yeah, nah, she's not allowed. Oh, the fans loved that, by the way. You know Rude from Final Fantasy VII and the star of Advent Children? He's here. He uses Cure like once in your fight against him and Reno in Final Fantasy VII, so they just kinda turned him into a support character that buffs everyone's bravery and heals the party. He's pretty good. Speaking of healers, there's healers that raise party members, healers that increase max bravery of other units, healers that buff defense, and of course healers that tank. There's also tanks that heal, and out of all of them, my favorite by far is Zack. Spoilers ahead for the ending of FF7 and Crisis Core, but I mean, it's like a 25-year-old game at this point, so if you don't know all about Zack, I don't feel too bad about spoiling the character. This remake trilogy is seemingly retconning everything about this character anyway, so DeFu puts Zack in a very particular role. That being the character whose kit is designed around drawing aggro while buffing your party members. His moves really translate well from Crisis Core, but his primary focus here is tanking rather than dealing damage. When I originally saw this character's kit, I thought, well, that's cool that he does that, but Why does he do that? Crisis Core is a game where your party consists of Zack and a really annoying slot machine that I'm not going to get into now, but for the entirety of the game you're fighting your battles alone. Seeing Zack as a supportive tank seemed kind of strange to me because for the majority of Crisis Core, Zack was slamming mooks with the Buster Sword, accumulating all kinds of wear, tear, and rust. Surely this guy should have been a DPS unit. Then, when the first trailer of Zack dropped, it clicked. See, at the end of Crisis Core and late into FF7, Zack and Cloud had to escape their previous employers because Cloud decided to quit Amazon without returning his company-mandated Echo Dot. And naturally, Amazon labeled both him and his middle manager liabilities, and thus something that needed to be disposed of. What followed was one of the most badass scenes in gaming history, where Zack fought to his last breath so that the Amazon employees won't find the hole he left his bro in. Zack absolutely eviscerates hordes of Amazon workers on their lunch break that have families, and he does so to protect his little bro. Zack inevitably is defeated, but his legacy lives on in Cloud, who honors him by winning squatting competitions, dressing like a woman, and trying to get with his girlfriend. So looking at Zack from this angle, is it any wonder why he draws aggro and makes everyone a little better? This is Zack portrayed in his finest hour, taking the heat off his allies and psyching them up so that they can be better. And I think the translation of the character into this game is really cool. Next, I'd like to address Defu's story. It has one. Moving on. One of my favorite combos in the game is Cloud and Okay, let's actually briefly talk about its story. It's a whole lot of characters getting transported to the world and they gotta team up to fight the big bad. I honestly couldn't be bothered to read most of it, but from what the Pork Chopper tells me, it was pretty generic and kinda bad. There are definitely some highlights in the form of the character interactions, however. Having an entire chapter dedicated to Edgar defining what it means to be a leader was something I certainly wasn't expecting from this game. Neither were the moments of Cloud reuniting with Zack after the events I just told you about, and Zack expressing his pride in what Cloud had become. Seeing the Warrior of Light talk about the growth of the Onion Knight, seeing the FF10 gang nerd out about Blitzball to innocent bystanders, seeing Sazh. There's some genuinely nice payoffs to some of these characters' stories here, and it kinda makes me wish I could see some of these moments in the full 4K extra special Final Fantasy CG experience. Of course, I can't mention the story without talking about Jack. He's in the game. This is Jack's game now. Seeing him go full chaos, get deleted, and then have my character say in the next cutscene that he's way too strong for them is an unforgettable experience. Although, I will say I think his dialogue is a little off. You see, Jack wouldn't say this. He'd say, "I don't give a fuck who you are." With so many different movesets, there was a lot of room for experimentation. One of my favorite combos was that of Cloud and Lightning. See, Lightning, on top of pumping out a lot of quick damage, pretty consistently manipulated the turn order. Using both of her skills made either one of them a little bit better, and Spark Strike actually just made her go again right after her turn. If this wasn't enough, an ability she got later actually made it so that she could re-break a broken target, moving them further down the turn order. Cloud's Cross Slash, on the other hand, had a % chance to just turn off the enemy's next turn, which, you know, is kind of a big deal. So I'd have a situation where I'd have Lightning being the quick lady she is, styling and profiling the enemies into next year, and then when the next year came, Cloud just kind of turned it off. Honestly though, the game was full of these cool, fun synergies, and seeing what the community could cook up with its janky, unlikely pairings was really cool. The biggest draw for me in this game was its co-op events. Basically, every time a new character was introduced, a set of fights launched with them, and you would do these fights repeatedly with you and 2 other people to get gems and pulling materials. Everybody came in with their best characters, and there was definitely a bit of envy when you'd inspect the one guy that had every piece of gear for a character along with a perfectly grinded artifact set. Or that one guy that pulled the best weapons for the newest character and showed them off for everybody. I lived to log in every day to run co-op events with randos in the Pork Chopper. See, obviously you can't let players have text chat, because if you did, the Pork Chopper would inevitably say the most heinous stuff possible to our rando. No, instead to communicate, co-op had these wonderful little stickers that made a noise every time you used them, and these noises range from to absolutely unbearably annoying. Guess which ones we use regularly? Me and the pork chopper lived for the I owe you one moments, where we would do everything right and where a rando would do something stupid like use an HP attack when the boss was about to hit them, leading to the boss breaking their brave and inevitably wiping the party. When this happened, there was only one way to react to the situation. So let's get to the gacha element of this game. You didn't pull for characters. You pulled for weapons that enhanced their abilities and stats, while you got the characters for free. Sure, you didn't need their best weapon to play them, but to see them running on all cylinders for co-op, you absolutely did. Part of me honestly wonders if this was the best idea financially for Square Enix. Like, yeah, it's nice to give your players access to the characters, but also meant less pressure and FOMO to actually pull. There's tons of weirdos that play Genshin just for the satisfaction of pulling their favorite character. And I can't help but feel that the absence of wanting that character was one of the biggest factors in this game's inevitable cancellation. That said, you absolutely need all the characters' weapons to run them properly. I can't tell you how many people in the first week of the game were running Cloud with this garbage nothing axe. Hell, I was also running him with a garbage nothing weapon. Maxing out a character's weapon would give you its ability permanently, regardless of whatever terrible weapon they were holding. You really wanted every single weapon passive to actually run a character. For example, what if Cloud's alternate 15 CP weapons actually removed buffs from enemies, which definitely isn't the best passive, but was an absolute godsend in some early fights back in the day where some enemies' buffs would ruin the party. The gacha in this game was actually really forgiving. Multi-pulls would give you tokens, which you could use to get any weapon you wanted, which is actually really nice when you compare it to some of the absolute bullshit coming from some of Square Enix's other gacha games. I never felt pressured to spend money on this game the way I have in other gachas, and a big reason for that was the benefit of foresight. You see, Japan already had the game for months before the global version dropped, which meant we could go to sites like Dissidia DB and check what was coming out in the future. This constantly felt like beating the gacha system, as people like me would continue to make safety nets for characters and gear we wanted, or tell our friends to not pull for this character and pull for that character because they'll be really good in the future. Anyway, throw all that out the window, because my favorite event in this game, by far, was the rise of the Chad Daddy Sazh. I have never played Final Fantasy XIII, but what I can tell you for sure is that Sazh is like a character in it. He's like kinda funny guy with little chocobo in his hair. Like, you go up to a random person on the street and you ask them what their favorite Final Fantasy XIII character is, and they'll probably say, "Get away from me, I have mace and a gun," but after your trip to the hospital, they'll probably say Lightning, Fang, Hope, Vanille, R2-D2, Chewbacca. Fuck me, I haven't played Final Fantasy XIII. They ain't saying Sazh! This living meme is one of the most unloved characters and possibly the most hated mainline Final Fantasy of all time. Sazh was shown no love on release of this game. The dude was constantly at the bottom of every tier list. His kit was a relatively weak brave attack and a move that raised the attack and crit of one other character in your party for 2 turns. The dude was grilled ass. So anyway, Global decided to give him his 35 CP weapon early. This gun, this one weapon, single-handedly changed Global for like half a year. If this weapon came out when it was supposed to, Sazh would have continued being an absolutely garbage tier support on its release, but a weapon that would have been mid later in the game's life was absolutely busted in its early life. Now suddenly, that attack boost doesn't just buff whoever you buffed, it buffed Sazh too. Now while we're at it, let's buff the target's max bravery so that they can pump out more damage on top of the crit and attack buffs. Let's make those buffs last longer, and sure, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just slap on a speed up for Chad Daddy Sazh because he's making the whole party harder, better, faster, and stronger. On top of all these buffs, Sazh would get HP attack plus, which was something they'd eventually put on pretty much every character, but Sazh, as previously noted, he had the speed up, he had the buff, he's just too fast, so he got it first. HP Attack Plus changed it so that when you did an HP attack, you'd deal a bit of brave damage before dumping your HP into the enemy, which at the time of his release meant a lot for the longevity of a fight. You have to remember, characters only had very limited uses of their moves, and when those ran out, you'd just have to rely on their stock HP and brave attacks. Not Sazh though. Run out of all your abilities and he's still pumping the enemies full of damage with his HP attacks, making him invaluable in pretty much every fight at the time through his ridiculous ability to sustain his damage. Did Sazh eventually fall off? Like a brick, and they never buffed him to make his kit as game-shattering as it was. I swear I heard one of the devs at the time say Sazh was a mistake, but for the life of me, I cannot find this quote. But I'm sure the Chad Daddy himself would be unfazed by a blasphemous statement such as this. But while he reigned, the community would argue over if it was okay that this literally Who character had become the face of Defu. And I say, I don't give a fuck! For the two Sazh fans in the world, this was the greatest thing to happen to this character. I personally got banned from the Defu subreddit for making this meme, and I will not apologize for my tone 5 years ago. Eventually they'd put out EX weapons, which let you do a big cool move that you would have to recharge, but it had infinite uses. A big thing with this game, especially early on, was knowing when to save your two character skills, but with EX weapons, fights would go on for as long as they had to. It's around this time that I'd like to point out that I really loved this game. I played this game every day. When I worked out, I would play this game on the treadmill. While I was at my friends' houses and I woke up early, I would sneak in a couple of co-op games with some randos where the guys were asleep. When they released little blind box figurines of the characters from this game, I would go to the only EB games in town that had them and scoop them up until after like the fucking 8th one when I finally got Cloud. I didn't just play on my phone. I had an alternate account that I consistently played with myself on my iPad. At one point, when my ex-girlfriend was too lazy to grind gems for a character she wanted, I stole her account and grinded for her. This is actually really embarrassing, but you know that time a couple of years back when I briefly talked about this game and said I didn't spend any money on it? I actually did make one purchase. This stupid outfit cost me like $50, and in hindsight, obviously this shit wasn't worth it, but to me in the moment, as a guy that played this game every goddamn day, it was absolutely worth it. I was showing my Cloud off every single day in co-op games. Why not spend a bit so I could have the Cloud from that terrible movie? Nowadays, I look at this costume and ask myself, how many people would buy microtransactions like this if there was a counter on them that told you the exact time when this game discontinued service and everything you owned in it disappeared? Opera Omnia was fun, but what made me leave wasn't the gacha. It was the grind. I don't mean to bore you guys, but I think it's important that you know why I quit this game and what goes into properly playing it. First of all, you can manually level up your characters. Okay, standard stuff. Then to make them better, you need to grind out their corresponding crystal color to level up the crystal level so that you have access to a bunch of really important abilities and a level cap increase. Then, obviously, after you grab their weapons from the gacha, you need to go ahead and level those up along with limit breaking them. To the game's credit, you never needed doubles of a weapon that you already had. Pretty much every material for upgrading you got from event missions, so that's cool. Alright, so your 35 or 15 CP weapons are fully limit broken. You can throw them in the trash and use a better weapon because now you have their abilities. Now you're going to want to pull the character's EX weapon and you gotta limit break that, go into another mission, grab a different type of material so that you can realize it, then level it up again, get another type of material to limit break your realized weapon, level it up again, and you have the passive. Alright, now from realizing and limit breaking that weapon, you can get a specific passive that grants a weirdly specific buff that you can put on any other character that can take it. And you'll want to realize that and upgrade a bunch of other EX weapons so that you can get the optimal set of these weird crystal things. Now go earn some armor coins so that you can go to the armor shop so you can get your character's specific armor. Level that up, limit break it,
make it cry, burn it, and let it swim.
Then do it again because there's a second tier you can only get after limit breaking the first tier. Okay, Your gear is ready, kinda. You see, you also have a character board that has a bunch of different passives that are absolutely 110% crucial for keeping up with content. You get points to spend on character boards by using that character, so this part's actually kind of easy. Alright, now at some point you're also going to want to grind artifacts so that you can potentially get the god roll on them and make your character a little bit better with an attack up or max brave up. Hope you get lucky on that! Next you have to start grinding summon boards. You level points for the summon boards by fighting the same boss over and over and over and over again constantly to earn points on the character's boards so that you can grant that character a couple permanent passives. There are a bunch of summons, and for your character to be any good, you'll have to max out every single one of them. Does all of this sound familiar to you? I know it's gacha, and it's a hallmark of the genre to keep players locked in a hamster wheel of grinding so they feel psychologically obligated to play the game, but this just wore down on me. All of this is like 60% of the grinding you'd have to do in the game's final state. Now, am I aware that there are ways to ease up the grind? Yes. Am I aware there are gachas with far worse grinding than this? Yes. That doesn't change the fact that I still had to do this for every character to make them somewhat playable. Think you'll only have to do this for your main party of 3? Think again. The game consistently launched content that required you to have different teams to get through it, and so an annoying but I guess fine grind for a couple of characters turned into a massive tedious maelstrom of bullshit for all the other characters you'd inevitably need to grind up to clear content. After I stopped playing, they released the Mog Pass, which gave you a standard monthly pittance of pulling materials, and a premium Mog Pass that made grinding easier. I saw a post a while ago about what the pass had in it, and I felt sad reading the comments. Most people were pretty annoyed with the state of the game, but where my heart sank was reading people that appreciated how much easier grinding would be now that they'd have this pass. It's like the game was conditioning people to feel appreciative that they were adding this as a paid feature instead of just putting it in the game. These people should have been mad that the game in its state was wasting so much of their time, to the point where this felt like relief. There's just something backwards about reading comments like this. The final straw for me was in 2021 when I just threw a couple polls into a random banner and got the newest character's best weapon that I wasn't expecting. And instead of being excited like I normally was, all I felt was this dread of having to grind all over again. Like, great, now I have to do a bunch of stuff to level this character up to see if I even like them. Tons of times I've left a game because something new came out or I just kind of got bored of it, but with Defu, a game that was so tightly weaved into my daily life, I had to stop myself and ask for the first time, why am I playing this game if I'm not having fun? With Defu, eventually my joy was outweighed by the bloated repetitive fights and the monotonous slogs through the menus to figure out what I needed to make my characters better. So I left the game, right up until I heard it was shutting down this year. Returning to Defu in 2024 has certainly been an experience. I would relate my time returning to this game akin to entering a GameStop for the first time in 6 years. The consoles and games you want are all in the same place, but look around and you'll start asking yourself why so much space is dedicated to Funko Pops and anime. And hey, is that a section for refurbished phones? Returning to Opera Omnia, it felt like I was being constantly bombarded by a barrage of bad UX. If the game needed you to do something to unlock something, it never seemed to give you a button that took you to where you needed to do that. I wonder what the Crystal Room does. Oh, I need Sparkle to enter the Crystal Room. Where's Sparkle? I don't fucking know! I had to spend a solid week trying to figure out the layers of the pop-up book of this main menu. Pull this lever to unlock this thing, flip this up to reveal that thing. Had to be a better way to navigate this. And while yes, I did figure it out, it was pretty infuriating for a while. I was confused as a player returning to this game. I can only imagine what a new player who got in midway through its life cycle was thinking to themselves when looking at this shit. Alright guys, I figured out how to get into the Crystal Room. It turns out that you need to fight a random weekly boss that resets every Monday in order to get Sparkle. You have to specifically challenge this fight with characters that are all the same crystal color, which, just so we're all clear, doesn't actually mean anything. Like, blue crystals aren't good at any particular thing, it's just the arbitrary crystal that you level them up with, but whatever. There seems to be this weird theme of focusing on crystal colors, but I see it for what it is, and that's more things to keep me grinding. This tutorial message says that if I set the difficulty to 0, this fight will be extremely easy, and I shouldn't have a problem getting that sparkle to enter the crystal room, and oh hey, is that Hell House? The game added a couple new weapon types since I stopped playing. BT, or burst weapons, are by far the absolute coolest in the game. You go into your burst state, time stops, and the music changes to your character's theme. Only your character gets to move for the next couple of turns, and they get to use all of their actions for free. After you unload a payload of undeniable whoop-ass into the enemy, your character will switch to whatever weapon activated the burst, and just absolutely massacre the enemy with a signature move. After a big explosion of light, a big number shows up, telling you the exact number of civilian casualties that were the result of your actions. Seeing these burst weapons go off is genuinely awesome. Then there's FR weapons, which stands for... Oh, okay, what do you got for me? What could this stand for? Fight Regulator? Fury Rager? Friendly Reach Around? No, it's Force. Of course it's Force. They're Force weapons. What's Force? Well, it's probably the single most important mechanic in the entire game in its final state. You see, now, every enemy in the game's health bar has become incomprehensibly huge. As you fight, your character's force gauge goes up. When you use a force ability for a set amount of turns, your HP attack's output gets multiplied by whatever your party's force is. And to be quite honest with you, numbers pretty much meant nothing to me at this point. When I look at this number and I see that the enemy health bar has gone from 45 to 43%, I am just kind of forced to say, yeah, is the battle system completely unnavigable now because of these preposterously high numbers? No, absolutely not. You still have to look out for enemies targeting you normally, but now there's just another dimension to it. Enemies also have a force gauge that fills up on your turn. You'll still have to be careful because enemies can hit you outside of their turns thanks to the gauge. I actually kind of like what this addition does for enemies. It kind of turns off my Cloud and Lightning strap from before, but I think overall it's a good way to challenge the players that rely on abusing the turn order. The force abilities themselves are pretty fantastically animated too. Activate your FR ability and your character will do a big attack with a seemingly random other character from the cast. Now, could these moves be better and more symbolic to each character if they were paired with a character from their own game? Sure. I would have loved to see Squall and Renoa teaming up and slam dunking an enemy. I think, however, these moves feel more symbolic of Dissidia as a whole. As a series that's meant to celebrate this behemoth of a franchise known as Final Fantasy, you only would see these kinds of characters teaming up in a game like this. It takes the best part of the story, the unlikely character interactions, and warps it into the gameplay, and that's rad. Lastly, you had the ultimate weapons. They didn't actually have anything too special about them, other than having big stats and, well, generally being the best. You also didn't have to pull them in Gacha, so hey, that's pretty cool. As for the Crystal Room, it's more passives, it's more buffing up characters. I guess there were crystal abilities. I don't know, man. It's more mechanics. It's another fucking thing to grind out, man. Truthfully, the type of content I played in the games last week was pretty limited. I would consistently find myself entering missions and either decimating them or getting absolutely decimated by them, and a big part of that was just the state of my team. I didn't bother to grind out anyone other than Cloud because coming back to this game and forcing myself to grind was exactly the reason I left it. I get it. There are people who have a higher tolerance for this kind of gameplay loop than I do, but I could not force myself to hate playing this game again. Of course, I had to get the pork chopper in for one last co-op on this joint. My man was absolutely the ball and chain while we were fighting the hardest co-op boss in the game, and we pretty much got carried by the rando's Yuna that joined us. We were so bad that the rando left, and on top of all this, we had to use gems to continue after dying. But hey, a clear's a clear, I guess. You ever get that feeling when you get back into a co-op game with the boys and every part of the game just feels just as awesome as when you left it? That absolutely was this for me. Despite it being years since I played, it was still awesome seeing Pork Chopper pull off his burst and do like no damage. and playing with randos was still as fun as ever. This is Porkchopper's profile, by the way. No Ultima weapons, no maxed out FR weapon. This squall is really bad, but for what it's worth, his profile message is a 10 out of 10. Minutes before the servers closed down, I joined a game with two random people named Tantalus Troop and Angel Toppin. I used Cloud, obviously. Tantalus used Beatrix, and Angel used Urania, both characters from Final Fantasies I'd never played. We spammed emotes at each other, we said our farewells in strange sticker form. I assured them that this was my story. And we blasted the shitty tree things with big-ass Bahamut lasers to finish them off. It's a very unique experience to play a game at the very end of its life cycle, and enjoy it in its last moments with people that I'm sure at some point loved the game as much as I did years ago. The servers officially closed at 11 PM, but because we were in a co-op game, we weren't actually locked out from playing until the mission ended. I'm not really sure how to describe this strange mix of nostalgia, elation, hilarity, and unity that this one last co-op game gave me. So I'll just say this. Tantalus Troop, Angel Toppin, if you're out there, I hope you're doing alright. Defu is just one game in the long list of mobile games that Square Enix has killed, and it, like many other games, only has videos like this and sites like Dissidia DB to prove its existence. When I say that, I don't feel sadness towards this game. It's just a simple fact. Every game ends eventually, and in a sea of gacha games that celebrate characters from different series, it's hard to really pinpoint what this game's legacy is past being the last Dissidia game to be released. Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia won't be remembered by the gaming industry for its gameplay. It won't be remembered for its mishmash of a generic story starring little toy versions of beloved Final Fantasy characters. It won't be remembered for the microtransactions, the gacha, the grind, and the several generic elements that make up mobile gaming nowadays. And gaming culture won't remember it by its fantastic community that stuck by it and helped new players navigate its constantly evolving meta. But it will be remembered by me, and the people that loved it, and the memories it created. And maybe that's enough.